everyone. Welcome to the Trading Without Borders podcast with Omobi. Today is a very special episode, and before we go into today's one, I would just really like to apologize for the long break in transmission. It's been a really busy period, so I had to just take some time off to handle some other aspects of work and that. But in the course of today's podcast, I'll be sharing more in terms of expansion and what has been happening. And I really want to say thank you to everyone that reached out to me to ask for an update. Why have I not released an episode? And I really appreciate that. It just shows the level of impact that this podcast has been making. So today is going to be a very interesting day. So I am going to be the one on the hot seat. I'm going to be handing over to Fuisra, a member of the Trading Without Borders podcast team. I'm going to share more in terms of expansion. We now have a team, and then I'm going to hand over to her, and she's going to be the host for today while I'm being interviewed. So the Trading Without Borders podcast became 4 last month. We started in 2021, and to the glory of God, it was 4 last. And today is a special episode on the 4 years anniversary of the Trading Without Borders podcast. So just sit back and relax and come and listen to what we have for you today. So please, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mo. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special podcast, episode 134 of Trading Without Borders. My name is Vuyiswa Kabela. Today marks our 4th anniversary. So 4 years of sharing ideas, unpacking policies, exploring Africa's trade landscape, and walking this exciting journey towards deeper integration under the AfCFTA. When the podcast started in early 2021, the AfCFTA had just become operational. There was so much hope, so much energy, and admittedly a great deal of uncertainty as well. Today, 4 years later, we have the benefits of both hindsight and lived experience. Before we go into the podcast and the discussion that we'll have with Mo, I just wanted to take some time to actually give an overview of who Mo is. So Mo, we call her Mo, but Mobala Adikona, who has been the voice behind the podcast for the past 4 years. She is a partner and head of Africa Trade Practice Group at Deal HQ Partners. She is a seasoned legal professional with close to 2 decades of experience in corporate and commercial transactions, specializing in international trade and intra-Africa trade with a deep understanding of Africa business landscape. She is a leading voice in Africa's trade landscape and is a passionate advocate for unlocking the vast potential of the African market and empowering businesses to thrive in the era of the AfCFTA. She provides legal and regulatory advisory services on intra-Africa trade compliance, AfCFTA implementation and market access. She is the founder of this podcast, Trading Without Borders podcast, a widely followed podcast that advocates conversations on unlocking Africa's trade potential. The platform disseminates insights and fosters discussion on leveraging opportunities under the AfCFTA. It demystifies Africa's trade agenda and amplifies stories of innovation, of integration, and cross-border collaboration. As an international trade consultant, Mo designs and facilitates regional capacity building workshops, trainings on market intelligence, trade data analysis, value chain development, and compliance for government officials, businesses, SMMEs across the continent. So Mo, welcome and thank you for having me here. I imagine it must feel a bit strange being on the other side of the mic, answering questions instead of asking them. So before we start with putting you on the hot seat, I just would like to do something that you normally do on your podcast, where you have the guests introduce themselves and say welcome in their own native language. So if you can just give us a hello again and a welcome in your own language, that will be great.
Thank you very much, Visa. It is indeed strange. You know, when the team came up with it and said, no, you are the one that is going to speak for the 4 years, and I'm like, oh, okay, I've been the one talking to people, speaking to people. Okay, Let's come on. Let me come and share what I have learned over the past 4 years. And thank you very much, Wiswa. So, in my local language, that is, I'm from the southwest part of Nigeria, and my local language is Yoruba. So, I'm going to be saying hello to you. So, I'll say, okay, good. Okay, I'll interpret what I'm saying. So, I'm saying ekaro, ekason, ekale. That's good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever part of the continent you're listening to us from. Bawoni, and that is how are you. Thank you for joining us. So I'll just say Eshe Pupo. Thank you for joining us today. So I hope that cuts it for Israel.
That's perfect. And then I will respond with Sawubona, which is my native language, Zulu from South Africa, Durban. So thank you so much for welcoming us to the podcast again. What I would like us to do today is look through 4 areas in order to commemorate the 4th year anniversary. And the things that I would really like us to reflect on are firstly, how far the AfCFTA has come since 2021. Secondly, whether the podcast has fulfilled or is fulfilling its intended role. And thirdly, your personal experience and challenges as you have been undertaking the podcast. And then lastly, based on your experiences, based on the discussions you've had, the recommendations that you would have for policymakers, businesses, and other stakeholders. So let's dig into it. So the first question is really focusing on your perspective, looking back at the AfCFTA till today. When the podcast was launched, the AfCFTA was still in its infancy. The agreement had come into effect on paper, but operationalizing it was very slow. Many people didn't fully understand what it meant, and businesses were unaware of how it would affect their day-to-day operations. Looking back from when the podcast started in 2021 up to where we are now in 2025, how would you describe the AfCFTA's progress from the early challenges and slow starts to the momentum we saw between 2022 to 2023 and the developments and ongoing obstacles that we're seeing today?
Thank you for this question, Buiswa. Such an interesting question. I think it's important for me to just also, in its simplest form, what the AfCFTA is. So, for anyone that is listening to us for the first time, or for somebody that's just getting to understand what the AfCFTA, because that's really usually a major issue. So the AfCFTA in its simplest form is just to get African countries to trade with each other more, to create a single market in 54 African countries and get Africans and remove all of the barriers that are hindering Africans from trading, from doing business with each other, and also to boost African economies. That is it in the simplest form. Just create a single market in 54 African countries, get us to trade more with each other, remove the barriers that are hindering us from trading with each other, because there have been various statistics, although some people don't agree. They feel like Africans trade more with non-Africans than within Africa. So the AfCFTA has come to address that. That is what the AfCFTA has come to address. So then I'll go into an overview of where AfCFTA was as of 2021 and where it is right now. I think for me, what I always tell people is that it is a journey. Yes, it is a journey. AfCFTA, just like you mentioned, the uncertainties in the beginning was to operationalize, was more on paper, but there's been various improvements. There's been some positive developments along the line, and I will be emphasizing, yes, are there challenges? I'm also going to speak about that, but I'm also just going to share a bit of the journey, where we were and where we are now and what has been done. So basically, I'd mentioned that, to get us to trade more with each other, to remove the barriers, but there must be some tools that guide those relationships. How do we do that in terms of for us to be able to trade more with each other, for us to remove the barriers? There must be some regulatory considerations, there must be some political considerations, amongst others, because there are 54 countries that are coming together to create a single market, and there must be guidelines to map that relationship. So that is one. It's the largest free trade area. So what is it? So the way the AfCFTA works is, so the agreement is the AfCFTA agreement, which is divided into protocols and trading goods, trading services, intellectual property, trade investments, and we have competition policy and dispute resolution. That was as at when the AfCFTA started. So the trading goods protocol was just basically how to remove the barriers that are hindering people from trading, and so that people can enjoy the benefits of trading by either under the preferential trade arrangement, where the tariffs are removed or reduced. So it's basically to remove all of the barriers, whether it's tariff barriers or non-tariff barriers that are at the port, so that people can easily export or take their goods around Africa. Trade in services, of course, to also liberalize trade in services. That's part of the objective, to all people to be able to trade more and reduce whatever it is that may be an obstruction. There's investment policy and all along. So that was when the AfCFTA, but along the line, that two more protocols were added. The protocol on women and youth, because of course, if we are doing it, it has to be inclusive, and we know the challenges that women and youth face. So the protocol on women and youth were also to also help women and youth to be able to facilitate trade for them, to address the challenges that women and youth in trade will face. Then the protocol on digital trade, which has moved amazingly really fast, because protocols were meant to be negotiated in two phases, but the protocol on digital trade was adopted in 2024, and the annexes were also adopted early this year, 2025. And the protocol on digital trade is also to create rules, harmonized rules that harmonized within the 54 African countries, like having similar rules that be able to people be able to trade digitally and remove whatever obstructions that may hinder us from, there's a lot of e-commerce, but there's a lot of online trading ongoing. Basically, create rules that harmonize to that will facilitate digital trade, help us to trade digitally. Yeah, so that is just it really. So I'll just move very fast. So what has happened? There's been various attempts in terms of the AfCFTA. Trade was meant to start officially in, I think that was the 2020, well, it did it, and there was 2021 official declaration. There was not really much trade, but in 2022, so that is why some people say, oh, there's just AfCFTA, nothing is happening. But there was the guided trade initiative was brought up by the AfCFTA secretary. By the way, we have a secretariat in Ghana, and we have the Secretary General, that is H.E. Wamkelemene, who is heading that secretariat, and they are the ones in terms of driving the AfCFTA along with other partners across the continent. And then the guided trade initiative was set up. That's basically like a test phase to test the functionality of the AfCFTA. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? What are the lessons that we're going to learn along the line? And that started with some pilot countries, like 8 of them, like Ghana, Cameroon, Tunisia, I think Kenya, Rwanda, amongst others. Of course, there were challenges because, like, I remember an exporter from Rwanda said when she exported her goods, and when she got to the ports of the country of destination, the border officials did not have an idea of what was going on. But we'll speak more of that. But eventually, that was able to be that was resolved. Of course, there was profit and all of that. So that is that. Then the other things that have also, there are some other instruments that have also been released for, basically are called operational instrument. How is the AfCFTA going to work? We have the AfCFTA e-tariff book. The e-tariff book is just basically for us to be able to get the schedules on tariff concessions. So for about 90 something goods right now, there are information on the tariffs that apply, or whether it's reduced tariffs or whether they are non-reduced, or the tariff removal completely. Then, of course, we also have the Pan-African payment and settlement systems, but for settling currencies or payments in local currency. So you don't need to have all of the issues of the FX volatility that you're trying to send money to an African country and they're experiencing the difficulties. So now if you want to make a payment for someone, let's say I want to pay Vuiswa, now we want to do a transaction. I'm going to be sending my money in Nigerian naira, and she's going to, or maybe I'm going to be billing in Nigerian naira, then she's going to send the equivalent in South African currency to me. So that's the way that is working. So whatever the back end in terms of the exchange rate, that's been done. So a lot of the banks are signed on. So most of the central banks of the African countries are signed on to it, and a lot of the banks are signed on. So if you want to do transactions within Africa, just go to the banks that are signed on to it and find out if your bank and you want to make a payment under the Pan-Africa payment and settlement systems, and that's sorted. And of course, you would say, oh, if the African countries are removing tariffs is a major revenue source for them. How is that sorted? So there are also other, like the AfCFTA adjustments fund, to help to support the state parties. So the African countries are called state parties. All of the parties that have signed, they have ratified the agreement. They signed it, they ratified it. Some have domesticated it. It's now been integrated into their domestic laws to make it binding, and you can, yes, to make it binding. So that some have done that. So how are they going to make money if they're going to be removing? Because that's more or less where they generate revenue from. So there's an AfCFTA adjustment fund that's also serving as a buffer for state parties in terms of the revenue they'll be losing, that they're going to remove revenue on goods. Because so that means, what it means is, under goods, trading goods, there's rules of origin to determine. So I'm just going to go back on rules of origin to determine the origin of your product. If you want to then send your product, export your product from one African country to another, for your product to enjoy preferential treatment, either removal of tariffs or reduction of that, they are going to trace the origin. And if it qualifies, if it's eligible, then that product will not. So you are then wondering, how is that then? What happens to the state? How are they making their money? So there's an AfCFTA adjustment fund that is created to serve as a buffer. We have in terms of tariff elimination. So we have the base fund, the general fund, the credit fund. Then I'll move on to also the non-tariff barriers. I've been emphasizing on tariffs. So there are non-tariff barriers like delays at port, documentation, in terms of standards, in terms of lack of harmonized rules. You want to export to country A, their trade rules are different. You don't even have an idea. So what are we going to do? How do we address all of that? Because there are major issues. There are issues at border posts. There are issues in terms of understanding even what trade rules, what are the export requirements, in terms of even quality standards. How do you ensure that your product meets standards, or the licensing requirement, the certification requirement of the other country you want to do? So there's also the non-tariff barrier reporting, online reporting mechanism that has also been created. Apologies. For you to be able to go and, where maybe you want to export goods, you then go and input that information and then say, oh, this is where it is. Yes, the development is being developed. Yes, all of those amongst others. Then the guided trade initiative, I'm going to speak more on that. Then we're also looking at the Inter-African Trade Fair, which is held yearly for exhibition. The Inter-African, the last one was held I think this yes, in Angola. Sorry, not Angola. What's the
Algeria?
Algeria. So it's usually Algeria. The next one is coming up in Nigeria in 2027. It's a week-long exhibition, like fairs, where you can go and exhibit your product, where deals are being closed, the big deals, the big infrastructure, mobilizing capital. There's the Canex, for the creatives, and that's an initiative of the Afreximbank, the AfCFTA Secretariat, amongst others. So it's a week-long event, and there you have some entrepreneurs. They've been able to attend something and they'll be able to sell their products. There are people that have been able to collaborate, enter into partnership. There are deals that are being closed in terms of infrastructure deals, financing, bringing bankable projects into the African continent. So that is also one of the initiatives that has come up in all of this. Then we'll look at, but I don't want to speak in terms of free movement. I'm going to speak more on that, but I'll just say, so there have been various initiatives in terms of developing infrastructure, in terms of mobilizing finance, in terms of helping SMEs, financing and funding. Yes, are there challenges? Yes, we'll speak more of that. But and then the digital trade protocol, there's a lot going on. I mentioned that it was signed, it was ratified early this year, and the annexes that is going to guide mapping out how we are going to trade under AfCFTA. Yes, are there challenges? The digital trade protocol talks about cross-border data governance. How do you govern data that's going to be passed across the borders? It's also talking about market access for digital products. It's the annexes that it's showing how do you identify an African digital platform, an African enterprise, digital enterprise. What are the criteria for determining that, so that you understand that you'll be able to qualify for preferential treatment. It also talks of non-discrimination of digital. When a product is created in one state party, you must not discriminate against it in your own state party on the basis that, it's not from the creator is not from or the creation is not from my own state party. An African-owned enterprise, it says that at least for an entity, an African must own 50% equity in that company, or they must be able to appoint majority of directors. Outlining the parts of online and cyber security, even in terms of innovation, even in terms of emerging technology, in terms of trade facilitation under digital trade, paperless trading, all of those things. And because digital admit that there's a lot of e-commerce, online trading ongoing as well. So that is, and there's been various initiatives from state parties. Different countries have been coming out in terms of implementation, making attempts. So these are some of, and there's been various investments, there's been various forums, capacity building as well concerning the AfCFTA, just to get it out there, to ensure that Africans understand and you're able to harness the benefits that the AfCFTA presented. So it's basically like, how do we bring in capital, digital flows, capital flows, financing into the continent? How do it also to bring in the influence of Africa in terms of global trade? How can we boost the influence of Africa, and we are not just relying on other continents? So when there's an issue in one country, it affects us in terms of. So what is AfCFTA trying to do? It's industrialization, moving us regional value chain development. We want to build our industry. We want to develop our value chain. So we are moving from commodities export, which a lot of us have, raw materials. That's the major thing. Why don't we develop our own raw materials into finished products and all of that? So that's the way we can boost our economy. So if we are going to be developing our regional value chains, they are going to be, it will create jobs, because across the value chain ecosystem, there are different jobs there are different services, there are different products that will be developed, even in terms of, so that is to increase our income, to create jobs, to reduce poverty. So those are some of the steps that have been taken in terms of the AfCFTA. And there's also been different reports in terms of what are the key sectors. Like if you look at the World Economic Forum, they've been in, and the AfCFTA bringing up, they've highlighted even the International Trade Center. For instance, for SMEs, the baby food sector has been highlighted as one of the key sectors that Africans would benefit from. But there are challenges. Some of the key sectors highlighted with the World Economic Forum and AfCFTA, you have the agriculture and agri-processing, we have the automotive, pharmaceutical, we have the logistics as well. Even the AfDB, that's the African development that has its I5 priorities. Some of these are industrialized Africa, feed Africa, light up Africa, because we know there are challenges in terms of power within our continent. So those are the various initiatives, the various steps that have been taken in terms of driving the AfCFTA. So like I always say, it's a journey. It's not a destination, but there are steps being taken. You may not see, you may feel, oh, what are they doing? There is a lot. Are there information gaps? Absolutely. But we'll talk more on that in the course of this discussion. Thank you, Voyeswa. Maybe I should stop here.
Thank you so much, Mo. Thank you for taking us through the developments of the AfCFTA between 2021 to 2005, and the various instruments that have been implemented, the protocols that have been adopted. And I think one part that you touched on that is quite important in terms of the AfCFTA is looking at the AfCFTA not just as a trade agreement, but also looking at it as a way to industrialize and to create industrialization across the continent, moving from just commodities to actually processing and manufacturing finished goods. So based on just all the developments and just this specific important parts in terms of industrialization, do you think that the AfCFTA is actually working?
Okay, thank you for that question. I get asked that a lot. Is the AfCFTA working? Yes. Are there steps being taken? Yes. But are there challenges? Is there some delays? Absolutely. So I'll be emphasizing. Yes, I've spoken about all of the steps being taken. Then now we'll focus on, okay, these are where the challenges are. These are where the delays are. For instance, I had mentioned the guided trade initiative that was launched just as a test phase to test the functionality of the AfCFTA and to take also lessons from issues that may have had challenges that they may have occasioned in the course of it. When it was launched, it started with 8 countries, but as at 2024, I think we have about 39 countries that have been signed up on it. What are some of the challenges? They were like, oh, the border officials were not even aware of it when they exported, like the case of the Rwandan exporter. I think he gave a coffee. They were not aware of what tariffs to apply because they didn't have all of those information, and that sort of caused some delays. But eventually, she was able to get that in. But because that's usual, that's going to happen. Being the first, that was the initial phase. And yes, one thing about the GTI, which I think policymakers that may be listening, yes, we always hear they usually fanfare, oh, this country has signed, that country has signed. There's no data to actually assess the success of it. Like data to say, oh, this is what has happened. This are the company, and for this country, this is the number of products. This is what has happened, and these are the challenges. So I think the need to share more information in terms of data on the guided trade initiative. What has happened so far? What is the status? So it is not just, oh, we get in and we know about it. Then after that, we don't really hear so much again. So there's the need for data. So those are some of them. Then, of course, the information gap, the barriers. A lot of people still do not know what the AfCFTA is about. I remember speaking with trade consultants. She was like, oh, she went to facilitate a training in Ghana. That even the people that are in Ghana where the secretariat is do not even have an idea of. So there's just information gap and lack of awareness in terms of what the AfCFTA is here to solve. So there is that information barrier. And all of that, people still, there may be some people at the top stakeholders level, they have an idea because you have the experts, you have the people working with you, you can get the consultants. But we want AfCFTA to across board. And you have even professionals that do not even know what the AfCFTA is. So there's the information barrier in terms of what are the opportunities, what steps are being taken. I know, yes, steps are being taken, but there's still that divide, there's still that huge divide. Then in terms of borders, there's been so much discussion in terms of border officials, issues that there were delays at the ports, and I must say that some African countries have started digitizing their ports, and I think that's a welcome development, really. So to reduce bureaucratic delays and all of that. Then we have the issues of the informal cross. There's a lot of informal cross-border trade ongoing in Africa. It's not documented, but there is a lot. But there are issues at the borders in terms of maybe border officials, in terms of harassment, in terms of they do not even know what rules should apply. So in terms of simplifying, there's what we call the simplified trade regime. We are trying to formalize, we are trying to get those informal traders to come under the formal system. But we've not simplified the trade system for them to come on. Or there is some African countries have, but there is not all. Maybe some regions they have, but some of those traders don't understand it. Then even border officials, because there is always this information that we go to a whole lot of our seminars, our forums, Business Council, this and that, with all our, at the top level, the policymakers are there. But the executors, the people that are going to implement, that are at the borders, is a different story from what is happening. So I think there's still that it either there needs to be more capacity building. I remember one of the guests that said that another issue at border is the change in border officials. So when a new one comes, maybe it doesn't understand the old trade, the old issues of cross-border trade. So it's a challenge. Then we have infrastructural challenges. Logistics is the main issue in Africa. But yes, are there attempts to integrate us? There have been various attempts in terms of driving infrastructure for logistics and all of that. There's still, that is the old lot. Even in road transport, of course, maritime, the sea, that is a major issue in Africa. Our road networks, logistics, yes. For instance, I know recently in August, the AFDB, the AfCFTA Secretariat, and the private sector, called AfCFTA, they signed an MOU in terms of designing, financing, and delivering transport, logistics, digital infrastructure to link African countries. We must admit one thing about Africa is that we are fragmented. 54 African countries. You can imagine trying to comply with various regulations, various laws. There's no, we don't have so much of information out there. Even in national country, people want to trade. Where are they going to get information about this country that I want to access this country? What are the trade requirements? What are the standards that I need to do? What sort of, those are some of the things. I know there's been various efforts in times of trying to address logistics or infrastructural challenges in Africa. I was reading a report, and we were like between 2014 and so there is not like it's not being addressed. It's huge. It's enormous. It's an Herculean task that we have to deal with in Africa. 54 countries trying to connect them. There was a publication I was reading online and said between 2014 and 2024, the African Development Bank has put in 8 billion USD in 109 cross-border projects in terms of roads, ports, and railways. You can imagine the enormous amount of money is being put into this, but Africa is big. So our market, I think the major issue is that our markets are fragmented. You want to go into one African country, you have to comply with the rules of your own, the rules of, you want to trade, let's say you want to export, you want to do trade in Africa, apart from the continental, the AfCFTA, you are wondering, I want to take my product to Ghana. For this particular product, what does Ghana expect of me? What are the packaging requirements? What are the processing requirements? What do they need in terms of standards, and what sort of licenses, certification do I need? I want to take it to Kenya. You need to comply with Kenya zone. I want to take it to Rwanda. You need to comply. So the markets are fragmented, and I know there's a lot of work in trying to how do we harmonize? You have to comply with the border procedures of different countries, and even road transport, connected borders. Country A, state party A, maybe they have their procedures. They are not. It's not connected. There must be a way to harmonize it so that once they cross to another border, they don't need to start. Have you met our own compliance requirements? All of it can be tasking. I remember during there was a forum last year in Zambia, I think, on digital trade, and I remember one of the CEOs of one of those companies had said that when they were trying to connect their system, the payments or settlement system across, they had to comply with, the task of complying with 54 regulations in terms of interoperability, making interoperable our payments, connecting the payment system so that we can make it. He said, imagine trying to comply with 54 regulations. Do you know what that is? That is a lot. So that is one of the things that is being addressed, that we need to harmonize our rules and regulations. Yes, it doesn't mean that we still do not have our national rules, where some of these will not be subject to it. But there must be, if we really want Africans to trade with each other, then we must be able to. Then in terms of free movement, that is a key issue. If people tell you, how can we trade with you? I want to travel within Africa is hard. To even get visas, to even enter another African country. I was reading the Free Movement Index, Africa Visa Openness Index, and the countries that were rated higher, Gambia, Rwanda, these are the countries that are leading visa-free countries. Some, they were, visa on arrival, some have cancelled it. Yes, the ECOWAS countries are doing well. It's open. I can travel within ECOWAS because I'm in an ECOWAS, so I can travel. I don't need to apply for visas. But when it comes to visas to all African countries, all Africans, Rwanda, the Gambia, Kenya, Those are the countries that are leading, and it's expensive traveling within Africa. So you can imagine somebody, well, I would rather just then travel outside of the continent. Why am I spending so much in an African country? And I must really commend them, ECOWAS country, about how many days ago they had come up with, in terms of operationalizing the adoption that were made by the heads of states of ECOWAS countries, rather, to reduce the tax or remove tax on air travel, because they want to promote tourism, and they realize that the cost of travel within ECOWAS is actually high. And so now they're going to be removing, or either we are removing or reducing the tax on the cost of air travel, so that the airlines are able to give cost-effective rates anyway. So I think that's a good development. Travel within Africa, so people tell you, if I can't move it, if you want to say we want to remove the barriers, if Africans are not able, I have my own experience actually in terms of travel when I wanted to, and it was like at a point I was just like, am I going to an African country, or what exactly is going on? Why is it this tedious to get a visa? Then even in terms of trading information, I'd shared that I've had people reach out to me. They were trying to trade under there. They're like, they don't even know where to start, or there was no information. By the time we go on, we're like, okay, let's start making, I'm not going to mention the country, let's start making inquiries. All of the government agencies were just getting, the relevant government agencies were getting different information. We couldn't, until eventually it was after various back and forth. Maybe there was somebody that was now able to say, oh, this is how you can do. That kind of like, oh, what it is, the guided trade. Somebody is saying, oh, yes, there's also much noise. When we wanted to export our product, we experienced this at the borders. So it's not to say, for me, it's a case of, we need the policymakers to ensure that they're keeping a close watch, monitoring in terms of border posts, what is going on. I'm not saying the border officials, but it is part of what we have guests have come to say on it, and they're part of recommendations in terms of getting the border officials, building their capacity. Sometimes it's not their fault as well. Like I mentioned that one of the guests had mentioned that sometimes they change them. The new person doesn't even understand, or is still trying to get a grasp of what this thing is. So all of those things, we need to get our boots on the ground and say we are moving beyond, we are speaking our phones, we are wearing our this. The crowd, the people that are implementing to ensure the most, but I believe there has to be the political willingness. And so don't let me speak too much because I still have some recommendations that would make, but all of this, in spite of all these challenges, like I mentioned, there are steps being taken by various development partners, the African Union, the AfDB, the Afrexim Bank, the AfCFTA Secretariat, and different support institutions, even the national countries trying to come up with their own. They have different national implementation strategies. Have they met with it? Maybe some, maybe not, but of course we must also take note of the fact that this is new. There are going to be mistakes. Yes, we'll reiterate, but there are steps being taken as much as they can, which is why the digital trade is actually, Nigeria has even made the AfCFTA digital champion. I was it early this year by the AU. So different steps are being taken. Nigeria is going to launch its intellectual property strategy during the course of this coming week. That's yes, and so there are the various efforts by different countries in terms of trying to operationalize the AfCFTA. Are there challenges? Yes, I've highlighted some of them, but in terms of it's moving, yes, there are steps, there are positive development, albeit it may be slow, delayed. You are not seeing any tangible, what do I call it? Tangible result. I feel we don't have tangible result, but there are steps taken at different levels. There are also capacity building being held. How do we yes, and there are also recommendations being made by different agencies. So these are the sectors with high prospects you can invest. These are where the investment is needed. We need investments in processing. If you want to move to regional value chain investment, we need investors, people that can invest in terms of processing facilities, road transport. Then they want to storage facilities. I remember there was one of the reports that I had read that the Ghana was investing in warehousing. From moving the products from farm to the city, the road network. What are the ways in terms of commodity exchange changes that are different in terms of how the farmers can advertise their product, get customers? What sort of smart digital solutions are also being used to support them? All of these are ongoing, but it's a journey. So I know they're optimists and they're pessimists, but we must realize that there are steps being taken. Are there challenges? Yes, are the challenges that are being identified, it should be addressed. It is slow, are there delays? Absolutely. I agree, but I know some people have said they are tired of there's too much of there's one forum, there's one. We must discuss this thing, but I also agree that in all of our discussion, what is our communicate, what are the next steps, so that we are not moving from one forum, one business session, one private sector, this one. There must be dialogue. The public can promote. There seems to be a disconnect. The private sector, they must be able to highlight the challenges to the public sector, that this is what is happening and these are the steps that we think you can take, and various support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mo. You've laid out the stark realities that are faced in terms of the AfCFTA, and especially what businesses have been going through. And what I'm taking from, all your various insights on the different issues is that, like you've been, emphasizing, it's a journey, and it's one that has had very promising developments, but also is still faced with a lot of challenges that need to be addressed. But at least you've highlighted some of the steps in which those challenges have been addressed, or potentially how those challenges can be addressed. So thank you so much for giving us that overview. What I want to do now is actually move the discussion to another focus area, which I think is very important. And it's the reason that we're having this discussion today, celebrating the 4 years of this podcast. So when you launched the podcast Trading Without Borders, I just want to understand what was the vision that you had for the past podcast, and then looking back over the past 4 years, do you think the podcast has lived up to its vision?
Thank you for this question. I think it's important because I know people ask me, so what led to? I must say that when I launched this, what prompted it was when I started getting into the AfCFTA space fully. I was just picking up the gaps in terms of some of the major issue, a major challenge that was being mentioned across board, or information gaps, information asymmetry, how to bridge that gap. And I got divine inspiration. I got up like, okay, we need to fill this gap. And this was what prompted, okay, we're going to advocate about the AfCFTA. What is it about? What are the challenges? How do we unlock Africa's trade? What impacts can we make to help Africans understand this? And this is what I've been doing. Also, I had the support of people back end trying to also help out, because it's a whole lot, and it was just address the information gap, help to showcase the opportunities in Africa, highlight the challenges that must be addressed. Let the policymakers also see this, and I believe that we've been addressing this, because I mentioned earlier, the joy of the impact when I realized, I try to be modest, but the impact is when people from across different countries come to meet you, and people are saying, thank you very much for what you are doing on the continent. Thank you very much. Because of the podcast, I understand what the FCF is saying. I had people that this break that I had people that reached out to me and like, what's going on? You haven't released an episode, this, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I had a tight schedule. I tried to, but I'm coming, but we're going to resume back soon. And I realized that what I've done, to the glory of God, for the past 4 years, and with the support of some people around me, it's been amazing. We've made an impact. I've met friends across the continent because of this podcast. I've interviewed amazing guests. I've made friends across Africa that we chat even daily, and I've spoken on platforms, and I've done because of some of this thing, and it's also in terms of aligning my career path. It's also helping to really, deepen my knowledge in terms of Africa. So I must say we've made an impact. But of course, at every stage of something, for sustainability, there must be to scale. There are different requirements to grow something, to scale it, and We are that part that the podcast is that part that it is time for expansion. But what has been done within the past 4 years, I believe that we've made and will to bridge information gap. Yes, have we reached where we want to know, but have we been able to do something substantial, made substantial impact in terms of the AfCFTA? I can tell you that if we are looking for one of the number one podcast on it, I say it, and people are like, oh, in terms of AfCFTA, this is one of the platforms that you're going to get. What I've done so far, we've broken down the protocols to explain. We share highlights, updates. We are sharing different information in terms of opportunities. Where I was looking at Wrapped, that's from Spotify, and I was seeing, because every year they tell me, oh, this is the country where you are the highest listeners from. There, I'm looking at the stats. There was a time I think that it was Switzerland. This year we've had Germany. This year Nigeria happens to be top. I've had South Africa, I've had London, I've had the United Kingdom, I've had the USA, I've had Canada, I've had different countries from the continent. And all of that just shows, and it shows you the demography of people listening. The people really want to know this. And I must say, we've not gotten where we want to be. We are reiterating and re-strategizing, but I believe that I've made an impact. Thanks to God. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's quite interesting to hear the reach that the podcast has had internationally. And like you said earlier on, it is about sharing information, simplifying information, and making sure that people have access to information on the AfCFTA. And I think it's quite interesting that, it's going across internationally. So well done for that. And then just still touching on the impact and your experience on the podcast, I just want you to share some of the most fulfilling aspects of hosting this podcast, as well as any major challenges that have shaped your journey over the past 4 years and how you actually undertake the podcast.
Okay, thank you for this. Some of the most fulfilling aspects. I think I could say I've had amazing guests that have come on this podcast, from thought leaders to entrepreneurs. So it's been diverse. And one thing we've been able to do, we've moved it from, when sometimes people can say Africa and it's just the coverage is just within their country or neighboring countries. We've been able, we have coverage that cuts across the continents. And we've had guests from different part of the continent, from East Africa, from West Africa, from from Southern Africa. It's not Africa. Yes, we're going to have somebody from Northern Africa, but that didn't work out because of something. So the coverage and the sort of discussions that you've had, and the knowledge that you have been able to come to, like, okay, what is this is it. Oh, and you're trying to, it has deepened my knowledge on Africa, and it's even in terms of my career, but to focus more on Africa, trying to understand not just trade, because there are things that are underlying. What are the underlying issues that are not allowing us to integrate? We need to understand our country. We need to understand our diversities, and it's gotten me like, okay, to do more research, to read books, to understand Africa itself. And I think that's what Richard, and of course, because of the podcast, you are here today. And Wisu has been an amazing backend support now that she has come fully on board. Trying to connect to different people. I've made new friends. I've spoken platforms right because of the podcast that covers, or whether it's within the continent or outside of the continent. The different groups. And all of that, and sharing their perspective, opening, just learning about, okay, these are the issues. We want to do this. I'm interested. I would really like that we solve this issue. When the guests come on board and say it, and I'm like, oh, these are the issues that we have, and I think that should be solved. That is one thing. Challenges, yeah, there have been challenges in terms of it being only me. I'll start with that. Of course, there must be limited capacity building something just alone. Yes, I had support. But now we are expanding. I may share more. We've expanded the team. I'll be introducing the team fully in general. We are now a 6-man team, and of course, with hopes that we expand it more, and so that the issue of one man, this thing, I'm busy and nothing goes on. No, now that we're putting structures and process, it needs to scale. And of course, some of it is all of that. People have that phone that think, oh, it's personal funny, but that's not even it. It's, trying to make an impact. The challenge is there. Then the challenge of sometimes getting some guests, I think, is with policy makers, really. I understand that maybe people don't want to come and they feel like, I don't want to say this like I'm representing this government agency or that, but it's to change that narrative. It is people want to understand what it is that you people are doing, like what I've expatiated this morning, like to break it down. No, but yes, people will say, what are you people doing? But if you don't come to speak, nobody will know. So I think we should change that narrative of, I don't want to be quoted or I don't want to go and speak on it. Let's see it as a collaborative effort. I remember the mini series that we had done on non-tariff barriers, cross-border issues, and informal trade, and we had spoken. We were to have a session with policymakers. I can tell you, it was a tough one. You speak to the people that have been trying to refer, or speak to this person. Oh, that person, no, I'm not the one. Speak to this person, and everybody will just take you. And I'm like, what is going on? It's just for you to come and share what is happening. You are reaching out to this agent, they're like, oh, we'll come back to you, and everybody is quiet. So I think you need to speak more. Let Africans understand, and there are various platforms. Some of this platform, I believe, cuts across all sectors, whether it's top level, whether it's the mid level, whether it's the informal. As much as possible, we try to break it down. So I think I have that challenge as well of getting some policymakers. It's not like they don't want to do, but they're just this. And I understand completely the way the public sector works. But I think we should also change that narrative and see it as an opportunity to also help. People are willing, private sector people are willing to help. And yes, we have also internally looked at strategies on how to address that such issues. But those are some of the challenges that I've encountered or experienced along the way. Thank you.
But I think it's admirable that you've been able to bring different groups of people together. I note the challenges of actually getting policymakers to have a voice on the platform. But I think you've had amazing guests on the platform that are experts in their field, that also have lived the experience of day to day making the AfCFTA work for their businesses. So I think that's been quite a substantial journey that you've taken in terms of just the diversity of guests that you've had, regardless of the challenges. And then just, you and I have known each other for over a year now, speaking on the AfCFTA, building networks in terms of bringing guests to the podcast. And I know that, from your experiences and our discussions that we've had, that it's, running a podcast, hosting a podcast as a one-man show is not an easy task. And I want us to just reflect on understanding what actually starting up this podcast, creating the content for this podcast and hosting this podcast, what has that taught you, both in your professional, life, as well as your personal life? Because you did mention earlier on, it aligns with your career. But I just want to unpack in terms of your own personal development, having this podcast for the past 4 years, how has that grown you as a person?
Thank you for that. I think one thing I must mention is consistency. I had people that was when they were like, oh, you're so consistent. I was releasing weekly episodes, and if there was not going to be an episode, I had to come like, oh, apologies for this, and that, until this long break. So it wanted discipline, the consistency, you have something to do. I remember there was a day that I wasn't feeling well, but I had to get up because I need to release an episode. And I got up, and because it takes a lot. You are researching, you are trying to analyze reports and put it in a way that you are then come and speak about it. So that is a lot of work. I had to do that with my daytime work, my daytime legal advisory, trade advisory work. So sitting down, sometimes I had to get up in the middle of the night. Yes, well, and you're reading, you're researching, you're taking down notes, you're trying to analyze the report and presenting it in a way that is and it's taught me that discipline, consistency, showing up irrespective, even when there are times. Am I going to say I'm always in the mood? I can tell you there are times that I wasn't in the mood. I'm just like, oh, but I need to do this. Because it is the end goal that is in my what you're trying to achieve. It's above your personal feelings, and also that is what it has taught me. And it's rewarding. It's rewarding, I must say, because when you make impact and when you are appreciated, you can see that professionally, it's helped me to also outline my career path in terms of Africa clearly. And that is one of them, which is why even right now in my firm, in the firm where I'm a partner, I head the Africa Trade Practice Group. So it's Africa now, my professionally, career-wise, is Africa wide, understanding Africa. It's not even just about trade anymore, development, just like I said, regional integration. How do we connect African nations that we relate closely with each other? There are issues in Africa. We don't, as I've said sometimes, when issues of trust, but I've met amazing people. And, just like that, we've known ourselves for a year before you even came on board fully. And you're doing a lot of work behind of reaching out to people, connecting, networking, trying to, okay, let's get this guest to come on board and all. So, it's that is also in terms of yes, I'm not a media people now, at least when people come to me, oh, the podcast, what do you think we want to do? And we have the volunteers that they want to understand what it means, podcasting. That's another part. Maybe I should call myself a media entrepreneur, but I'm not an entrepreneur because it's simply this is a non-profit venture. But yes, I'll be able to develop some media skills. Yes, do I still need more? Yes, because I've had people come to me and say, okay, maybe you should go to this, you should go to that. Maybe in the nearest future, maybe we can look at video, but it's also helping. I love to be very cool, can maybe do things in a very body. You know that no, you can't. You have to be visible, and that is what it has done. It has given me visibility as well. So I would say this is what it's done so far. The networks that I've built because of this, the friendships, the visibility, the skills that I have gained, being consistent and being disciplined to continue to push through. I know even for us to record it was really hard trying for all of us to get the dates and get this done. But we had to sit and like, oh no, we must do this before the year runs out because we must celebrate the 40th year anniversary. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I think listening to you and also knowing you now as personally, I think on a personal and professional level, your commitment to this podcast and this podcast in terms of its vision of sharing information on the AfCFTA really strongly demonstrates your commitment to the continent and being a part of the solution in terms of ensuring that, the AfCFTA does work and it does work for the business on the ground. So well done for that. And then just in terms of how this journey has actually shaped your understanding of Africa's integration. You've spoken to a lot of different speakers, you've read a lot of reports, and I just want to understand if it's shifted your understanding, enhanced your understanding on Africa's integration agenda.
Yes, it has. I've spoken a lot on that. Sometimes when you are not in the middle of it all, you may you can be what is going on? Why are they not doing this? But what I appreciate is because I've been involved, I've been trying to understand our story, trying to understand Africa. You see why there are some challenges, you see why there are issues, and it's opened me up. I've gained insights on why certain things are happening. There are certain barriers, why our regional supply chains, why our region we are not connected, why there's mistrust or distrust, and it's a different case when we're looking at it from the fire. Okay, this is it, this is that. But being in the middle of it all, I've been able to appreciate and understand the level of what steps that have been taken so far, what is being done, what must be done. It is enormous. It is huge. So we can say, in 54 countries with different fragmented markets, trying to access them, it's not a walk in the park. So it's given me insight that I can say it's not even just about trade anymore, because for you to even understand it, you need to understand Africa's story. And that is what I appreciate this. Like, I'm still learning. Have I gotten it or no? I'm still learning more. And even the diversity, relating. Yes, I've had that. Okay, maybe I would say relating with others globally in terms of internationally. Of course, there are different. I remember when I did my master's in Durham University, then you relate people from different continents. I think I had a friend that come from Zimbabwe, but this close call with other Africans, it was with the AfCFTA that was able to really, okay, let's build a network with Africans, really, not, of course, my network outside of the continent. So that is what this has done. Thank you.
I think what you've highlighted there is the complexity of being in the middle of this process, and you don't take things just at surface level, but actually understanding the gaps, the challenges, what's actually going on behind the scene, and also just understanding that we do live in quite a complex continent that's full of diversity. So I think that's great that you've been able to gain that insight in terms of Africa's integration and in terms of just connecting with people from different walks of life. Just now that we've gone through the experience in terms of running the podcast, hosting the podcast, what I want to get from you now are your insights and recommendations based on the discussions you've had, based on your own research, based on your own lived experience, because you do work within the space. So I have a couple of questions that I'd like us to go through in terms of what recommendations would you give? So the first question I have is that after 4 years of interviewing experts, engaging with businesses, and tracking the AfCFTA, do you have any recommendations for policymakers, entrepreneurs, and other stakeholders and listeners that have been part of this journey? So that's it. So just in high level, just overview, just what would be your high level recommendations for the different stakeholders when it comes to the AfCFTA?
Thank you, Voyiswa, for this. For policymakers, I'm just going to emphasize on some of what I said earlier. We need to get this information out there. We need to address this information barrier. There's a whole lot going on, but people are not aware. So I know there's some work with private sector. You may say there are different individuals, businesses that are also trying to support. I think our policymakers should work with them. The border officials, there's a divide in between the people making the policy and the implementers, the executors. Let's get on board and see what is going on at our borders and our ports and ensure, because if we look at in all some of the guests, the last mini series that we did, the one of the factors, issues that cuts across borders, border officials, these at our ports. Let's also build the capacity of our officials at the borders. Let's help them to be able to do this work, so that when we are making the policy, when we are going to speak at the forums, the people they understand, and it's not like, people say, I heard this at the forum, and they want to export, and there's they're experiencing roadblocks. Then I think information, a lot of the state parties, let's have information on how people can easily export. Let people be able to access information easily. Even I could say, even with the AfCFTA, its online platforms, let's make it interactive. If we look at, I know it might not, once the market analysis, but the ITC, I can remember I was doing some work on the EU access to market, interactive portal, telling people at every step, this is what we need to do, guiding people. Let's make it interactive. I know there's some work being done. Thank you for that. Well done, kudos on that. But let's make it let people understand. Let's use language. Let's not use technicalities. I remember before we started, I was discussing that. I was trying to read up on one of the information on the portal, and I was like, what is this? This is too technical. And just it doesn't need some people like us to just except you are saying that you're just leaving technicalities to maybe some high-level stakeholders or people that understand technical concepts. If you just want all Africans, even SM, to understand and come, please let's use language that they can understand. I saw, so maybe I don't know if I should give the example. And I was reading about the PAPS, and I saw, is this, and I'm like, fantastic. But somebody that might feel like it's not so, maybe in terms of literacy, the person just needs to understand that, this is just for you to make payment and settle payment in local currency. Let's use languages like that people can easily relate to. Let's bring all some of those technicalities down. Let's work at the border. Our informal cross-border thing. Let's have a continental simplified trading regime. If we want to adopt our informal cross-border traders together, because so that to help them, some of them are facing harassment, different things in terms of doing the informal trade. Let's help them to be able to come on board. Let them understand. Let's make the processes simple. And our countries must be open. We need to have free movement. I know, yes, a lot of work is being done, but well done on that. So those are some of the things that needs to be done. And yes, let's harmonize our trade procedures, our trade rules. Yes, it's a lot. We will get there. Some steps have been taken, but it's important that there must be political willingness. For me, I think some of it is lack or maybe reduced political willingness. Because if there is the political willingness, this is going to cascade down even to the lowest, to the low level. No, I don't want to use low level. Pardon me. Maybe to the ones that are still at the growth stage of their career in the government agencies, because they understand the tone from the top. So maybe some people just feel, oh, maybe there's no political willingness. They just, oh, we want to do it, but we are all doing, everybody's doing something else. So let's have that. Let's build our capacity of our officials. Let's help SMEs. And yes, a lot of this is being done in terms of funding and capacity building. Let's provide information on trade information, compliance information, standards, and all of it. Work with the government, please work with private sectors to do all of this. We need to be, people need to understand, they need to be able to get information on this. We don't have to, it's not everybody that can sit down and research. Some of the SMEs, they don't have the funding to be able to get people, consultants to do it for them. One of our trade agencies, our website, our info, we must contain information. Let's have what we can. So if I want to export to this African, yes, I know we have that. I think the AfCFTA on the site where you can see, but not everybody that has that information. Let's make that information. Let's put it out there. There are different steps. There's the Africa Trade Gateway that the AfrEximbank is also doing. More people need to be aware of all of this initiative. It's not like they are not being done. It's just that we need to get it out there. So we need to move fast. For the guided trade initiative, let's have information. Let's move. I know some countries have started trading fully, but let's not plateau with the GTI. Let's move. Despite all of the challenge, we can't achieve all in one day, but along the line, and just like I said, we appreciate the work that has been done so far. But we need to move more. We need to reduce all those delays, and so as to reduce the cost of trade for SMEs. When our borders, the people can easily move around, then transportation and logistics. I appreciate there's a lot of, just like I mentioned, in terms of mobilizing capital and investment into the continent, trying to, what are the cross-border projects that they can do? Then their transport corridor. Logistics is still a main issue. Getting your goods across is still a main issue, and that must be solved. Let's innovative solutions, smart tracking solutions. How do we even help our farmers? Let's people know. People need to also know, okay, we are saying maybe not the high-level investors, mid-level. Some people just want to invest. Where can we invest? They've highlighted some sectors as sectors with high priority. Let's help them to outline it, like, okay, you can. We need processing facilities. We need people that are under them to invest in terms of standards, understanding quality. How can we help them? Let all of this information be out. We are going to the podcast. We are our direction. We are going to go into that more, a lot of that. But that then in terms of businesses, we need to work with the policymakers. They can't do it alone. I know there are some efforts being done. Let's help more. Let's highlight each other, highlight the challenges, whatever we are facing, all of the tools that have been, let's make use of it. Sometimes it's not like those information, but maybe when we go, we don't want to utilize those tools. And so it's a less utilized. If we tell them, it's when we use those tools that they are then able to, oh, I tried to use it, this did not work. Let's utilize those tools. Let's let them help them to identify where the areas are, the challenges are. Let's, public-private partnership in terms of finance, let's even up the SMEs. What kind of support can we give for the younger? I know some institutions are doing that, providing funding, investment. There's been various VCs and MPs coming in for startups and all of the, but there are some that are not startups, what are SMEs. Let's get more people within the trade ecosystem. Let's help them to identify where can we plug in, where do we need investment, and all of those things. for SMEs, please join business associations. Some of this information you will not get there playing being a solo player. That's where you get information. Some SMEs get sponsorship to attend IATF, as I hear. They get for exhibitions and fairs. When you join all of business associations in your country, in your state, in your around you, you're able to get access to all of this information. And yes, and so that is part of. So that's just what I would say in terms of recommendations. There's been, let's have simplified trading ready continents wide. Even in terms of a regional economic community, there are already some trading rules. They are meant to be building blocks for AfCFTA. How can we harmonize? Let's harmonize. Let the big ones, let them support the smaller countries in terms of technical capacity. I know there's a lot of that ongoing with support of but so that we begin to see all of the benefits. We're beginning to see results of some of these steps that have been taken. Thank you. So I'll just stop here for now.
Thank you so much. I think a very important part that you touched on in terms of the recommendations, quite extensive recommendations that you've given, but an important part is the political will. And, it's often said that, signing an agreement is not enough. And also what we find is that there are tensions between national priorities versus the AfCFTA priorities. So at a country level, what steps do you think countries still need to take at a national level to fully implement the AfCFTA?
Well, for country level, I know quite a number of the state parties, they had their national implementation strategy. So I know a lot of dialogue, negotiations, efforts were put into that to come up with those documents. So it is for the countries to just take it up, analyze, and look at where they are, what have they been able to achieve, what are the steps needed to be done to, if they were not able to achieve much, just look at what needs to be done. Take steps, provide support to your nationals, even in terms of SMEs. How can you help them to build capacity? In terms of funding, how can you support in providing funding? What information as gap must be addressed. Let's put out our trade information. You want to export, let's make it easy for people to be able to trade under the AfCFTA. Let's make Africans to trade. So let's put in our own effort. Capacity building, all of the non-tariff barriers. What are the mechanisms apart from the one that the AfCFTA Secretariat is putting? What efforts countries should be able to come up with addressing their own non-tariff barriers? What are the mechanisms? What are the solutions that they should also be putting in place to address it? How do we reduce delays at the port to reduce the cost of trade? I mentioned that some countries have started digitizing their port. I know that's a huge investment. Let's look at bringing investment in that area to reduce bureaucracy, to train trade officials, simplify our trade documents. Let's sync even our agencies that are all involved in export, so that people are not going. I know there's that company. Oh, you meet this agency, you meet that agency. Let's be able to sync their operations and see that somebody wants to export without having to be getting different licenses, different permits, to be able to one-stop shop for that. Those are the things that we need to start looking at. Then the investment protocol has various incentives there. We should start looking at, okay, how do we that at the continental level? What are the things that we need to attract investment so that they will get the benefit, eligibility for preferential benefits under the protocol on investment? What do we need to do? How do we need to prepare how can we help our businesses access businesses in another country? How do they identify buyers, market access, be able to connect and linking them with buyers, with suppliers from other African countries? Yes, some do. They can get consultants, like they can come and you can do that research, do all of that work and get it. But some, doing for SMEs, even making use of our institutions, our university research institution. I remember that one of the challenges identified when in that report of baby food industry, it's high prospect, but SMEs, because they lack resources to be able to get technical capacity or the people that can do all of the research. Why don't we work with our universities? Let them be able to, maybe their research, we have the food science and technology or the relevant department that can do some of those research for them, partner with all of those organizations. Then funding, helping to be able to access funding with and on terms that they can easily meet. I know, yes, there are institutions that are providing different sort of financing, grants, blended finance, and all of that. But helping them to be able to access, preparing them, capacity building, working with the people that can help them to train them. So that is what I'll just recommend. Thank you.
Thank you so much for touching on those. And one aspect that you've touched on in that response is looking at SMMEs or MSMEs, which are supposed to be at the center of the AfCFTA. And you've mentioned a few ways that they can be assisted. But in just expanding on that, what should policymakers prioritize to truly prepare and empower small businesses for cross-border trade? And on the other hand, how can SMMEs also ensure that they are able to leverage the AfCFTA?
Oh, I mentioned that earlier. To support SME, I think funding is very key. Funding and capacity building, that is what they need. Where there's the funds, they are able to take their businesses to level, expand their operations to be able to export. Capacity building in terms of understanding trades and standards, meeting standards, quality requirements of other African countries. For instance, you say if you want to export a product to a francophone African country, there are requirements that on your package you must have French, and all of those things. Understanding those things, you want to take to North Africa, allow requirements in terms of stating that this product, maybe it's a food product, was slaughtered in accordance with allowed requirements. Some of those things. Different countries have their own, helping them to understand, even from the farmers to how they grow. How are you supporting the farmers so that the seeds they are using, how they are farming, their farming technique, they are able, because sometimes they trace to how the products or the seeds or they were farmed. Are they meeting requirements in terms of chemical application, in terms of fertilizer, in terms of how they are going? What are the smart agriculture techniques that we can help to support them? What sort of platforms, electronic trade, digital trade, e-commerce, helping them to understand, put their products there. I know there are various platforms that are saying, come and register to be on this platform. There's a lot going on. If you go on Instagram, and a lot of them are already doing that. But how can they tell you, I would like to export my product more? I remember I got a product from one of the African countries, and I'm running out of it, and I'm like, I'd like to have. So my friend there is trying to, would say somebody coming down to Nigeria to help you, bring it out, help them to logistics in terms of getting their products out there. And yes, thank you.
And you've touched on digital trade, which is becoming a big part of the AfCFTA. And, looking at recommendations, what are the infrastructure gaps that need to be addressed to help African businesses trade more effectively online?
For digital trade, I remember reading a report by the UNECA, and it said internet connectivity in Africa moved from 2% in 2005, and we are about 37.5. So we are one of the fastest continent adopting the internet. But at the same time, reading another report, a publication by the International Telecommunications Union, says that our usage of internet is still really low compared to globally. Globally, internet adoption is about 68%, and whilst we are still at around 30 something. So we must add, yes, we are adopting the internet, but there's still the issues, challenges with getting digital trade for SMEs. We have the challenges of affordability, like getting mobile, the costs of getting a mobile broadband is high for something. We have the digital divide, digital literacy, lack of digital skills. So some businesses might still need help in terms of putting their products online, advertising their products, because you need to ensure safety and security. People should be sure that you are not even getting scammed. You are buying with legitimate organizations. How do you help those ones? Like everybody, I'm sure a lot of SMEs have been able to take advantage of the various social media platforms to identify their products. But how do we get more in terms of what are the platforms? I know there are platforms being created by various development institutions. That how can they even get access, be able to put their products when the due diligence is conducted, they get on that, and then maybe they meet the requirement and they can sell more to a wider market. They can gain their own share, because if you don't open up, if you open, other people are coming to your own country, the other Africans, we say we are opening up our market. So to be able to gain the market share, how can we get buyers, interested sellers, at the same time with doing it on that rules, that regulatory requirement that requires that, for us to have to be able to facilitate digital trade, we must harmonize our policies, our regulations, and to ensure safety and security in terms of how do we govern data that is shared. What are the requirements in terms of providing as a non-discrimination of our products? How do we identify African businesses? So those are some of those challenges that must be able. But there's a lot being done in terms of digital trade. And I must say kudos, well done to all of the policymakers concerning that. We just will need to get more of our SMEs, especially because that's where they can really, a lot of them will function and be able to participate. And just we hope that they will continue to do more in terms of that. Thank you
so much. We've covered a lot of recommendations that have been based on your interactions with the different experts that you've had on the podcast, the amount and like the vast reading that you do as well on the topic, and your lived experience. So thank you so much. You've given us really practical understanding of what the gaps are and how those gaps could and should be addressed. So thank you so much for those insights. We are wrapping up now our session, and I just have a few questions for you in terms of what we can expect from the podcast. So I just want to know, in the coming year, we're wrapping up 2025, we're going into 2026, and you're celebrating 4 years of actually having this podcast live and running. So moving forward in the next year, what can the listeners expect from the podcast?
Thank you for this, Wisra. I must say, I think I'm really appreciative of this 4 years journey for everyone that has contributed so far on that. And I must say that I think the first thing first we are doing is expansion, scaling and expansion. We're moving from a one-man show. We have a team now, a team of 6 amazing people across the continent. And we're moving from, yes, we'll expand more. That is one of two. So also be able to create the impact, the level at which we want. We're also looking at partnerships and collaborations. We need to have a wider coverage as well to get the information out there. We're working with different private sector actors as well to partner, to collaborate, to share. And we're moving from just audio. Now we're going to be having documented information, like the mini series that we did. We're going to share some of the recommendations, the challenges that we're sharing with different private sectors, so that even they can get it across to policymakers. We are going to be sharing information on trade updates. Where are the markets? Where are the sectors different? We're going to be having more mini series, even in terms of regional value chain development, integration. Different areas that we are going to be having to take it. We're expanding, and this is quite it's still a huge task. So the one we have done to set up, we have gotten here, but now it's expansion and it's going to take us. So those are the areas that we are looking at, and we'll be able to create more impact to get it not just within Africa, outside of Africa. And yes, with the and with the help of our listeners, our supporters, sharing, taking this out and all of that, and we hope that we can create more impact to give it a wider coverage. Thank you.
It really sounds like there are exciting times ahead in terms of the expansion and in terms of really executing the vision that you have for this podcast. So congratulations on that, and putting in the work and the hours, and making sure that your vision comes to life. You've touched on, the listeners as well. And I just want to ask you, in terms of your listeners, the experts that you've had on the previous episodes, and everyone else that you've interacted with, do you have any message or words of appreciation for the community that has been supporting the podcast over the past 4 years?
Yes, I just want to say thank you to everyone that has supported this podcast, to friends, to guests, taking the time even to sit down for an interview. It's a lot. People that even referring guests, Israel has done a lot of that at the back end. To others, to people that listen, taking your time, it can be tiring to listen to podcast. And people give recommendations. They say do this, and when the issue of written is said, oh, some people say, can you transcribe this episode? We've had to transcribe because we want to forward to a certain government who says that they don't want audio, they would like to have something written. Such recommendations come from a place of, oh, we want to support you. What you're doing is you are creating value, and these are the ways that you can create more value. And I really want to appreciate everyone. Even people I said that people reached out to me. What's going on? Why have you not released episode? I hope just some sort of showing concern, support for the work. It just shows that you are adding value. And I really just want to say thank you, everyone. I appreciate you all, and God bless you all. Wherever you are a part of it, whether you are within the African continent, outside, even just giving words of encouragement, it's a whole lot. Thank you. And to every member of the team that have just come on board, I appreciate you all. It'd be a lot trying to take out of your time to make impacts in Africa. Thank you all so much.
No, thank you so much, Mo, for also just starting this up. And like you said earlier on, it's taught you to be consistent, and actually, executing your vision, starting something, continuing with something, and also being mindful of what other people, the contributions that other people have made into the podcast. So just well done on that. And then we've spoken a lot in this session. We've touched on a lot of different aspects on the AfCFTA, on your experience running this podcast and your insights on the AfCFTA. But I just want, before we close off, to give you a moment and just ask you if there's anything you'd like to leave our listeners with as we close this anniversary episode.
Thank you, Viswa. I think I've said a lot. So what I'll just say is get involved. There is a lot going on. You need to plug yourself in and take advantage of the benefits. Yes, there are challenges like I highlighted, but all the same, you need to be involved. Find a way to where you can operate within the ecosystem. Thank you. This podcast, we planned for a 30 to 45 minutes recording, but it's exceeded that because I just like, we just highlight this, but it's my passion for it that I can see that even the things that I had not thought I was going to touch and moved into it. But so that's just my last word. Get involved. Thank you. Borderless you, borderless me, borderless. We want Africa. Africa without borders. You without borders. Me without borders. Africa without borders. That's what it is.
I love it. No, Mo, thank you so much. And once again, congratulations on 4 years of having an impact and of actually making a difference and contributing to Africa's integration agenda. So congratulations once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, and I guess with that, I'll just say to our listeners, thank you for listening, and until 2026. So, okay, I guess that's a bye-bye from Viswa. Are we saying bye-bye to our listeners? I guess that's what it is. So thank you all for listening. So looking forward to releasing more episodes in 2026. Thank you and bye-bye.